I'm seeing a lot more, even in this season, multiple offers on the same home. So not to say that no seller credits are being negotiated, or once they're in escrow and there's, they do the discovery and all of their inspections, that they're not able to negotiate repairs or credits of some sort. I think that is still absolutely happening. But I'm seeing sellers being very willing to be like, no, if we don't get our price, we're just going to Airbnb this property. Maybe it's an investment home that was literally, I have a home that just went clear to close yesterday. They should be signing tonight or tomorrow, but they were putting an offer on a home in the Clovis area that was also an Airbnb. And the sellers were like, we'll just keep Airbnb-ing it until the spring. Like, we don't get our number, we'll just make we'll cover our expenses or then some. And then we'll make all the money or more in 3 or 4 months. And so I think buyers are now starting to also see like, oh no, I think it's starting to turn the other way. I think, there's starting to be more competition, and more people that I'm talking to, even anecdotally in their workplace or their friends, are talking about wanting to buy a house. They're seeing it in the news. So I think we still have a chance to get a better deal than you're going to get, I think, later this year. But I don't think it's going to be the same as what people were getting last year.
Hey, welcome back to the Pursuit of Property podcast. We are here today for the final podcast of 2024 with the same guest that led off 2024 back in January, our good friend, David Keller. How are you, David?
Fantastic. Did I talk to you, the cameras?
Hey
guys, I'm doing great. Hey Scotty, hey Kate.
He's already,
dude?
He's in vacation mode for those who can see on camera.
Dude, this is an everyday fit.
We're on it.
Floral.
Well, Keller, we have you back. We're wrapping up. This is the third market update we've done this year with you.
True.
And this is the recap, looking back at what our predictions were at the beginning of the year, our midway update, and now seeing the conclusion of the year or close to it, just kind of feeling out how we felt we did and what we think maybe the next year looks like. So I guess that goes without being said. Do we remember exactly what the predictions were? We should have had notes on this.
I was listening to the podcast like 20 minutes ago while I was scarfing down a Starbucks everything bagel and double smoked bacon. But
so the market has to be pretty decent.
Yeah, it depends on, I guess, my mood going into that sandwich and bagel combo session. But no, I think the market's been fairly close to what we anticipated from at least what I listened to. There obviously, I think some of the patterns and some of the depths of the cuts and things haven't gone exactly the way that we anticipated, but it's been fun listening back to our podcast. Were you guys able to listen to it a little bit as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember too, we did the second update around summertime,
August.
About halfway through August. And we did that right as probably I was in escrow for my house. Mm-hmm. And I remember at least sitting in that podcast, and we've even had this conversation going, fuck, dude, I really don't like the rate that I'm sitting at right now. I'm like, David, we'll close on this, but I need you to look into your crystal ball and tell me when I can refinance out of the 7.1% interest rate. Mm-hmm. So it's funny looking back, not only starting at the beginning of the year, obviously hoping and anticipating for those couple, rate cuts. And then when we ended up doing that podcast in August, I was a conventional borrower. I wasn't doing FHA or anything like that, but ending up kind of on that middle high end of where we saw interest rates on the year as a whole, right? Yep. Because we saw rates poke up. What was the highest rate that you did this year?
Oh, I can't remember off the exact top of my head, but I think it was probably around like a 7.625 or maybe a 7.7.
Say semi close to 8.
Yeah. I think, if we're saying for a primary residence,
of course,
right?
absolutely.
If we're going investment, primary. Then over.
Oh, yeah.
I did an investment loan. I think it was 8.25.
Yep.
But yeah, for primary residences that were non-government, right? Conventional loans, which normally carry a higher interest rate. And most of the figures that we're going to talk about are based off of that conforming loan rate. It was around like 7.75. Yeah. So really we saw the lowest was around September, right? So we saw that first of the rate cuts and the largest rate cut that happened in September. So we saw rates actually kind of leading into that first cut from the Fed. They had gotten the lowest that they were. So I was seeing maybe a little bit below 6.5. But yeah, you caught it really like dead middle. And I think we kind of laughed about it because we're like, man.
And catching it dead, like really can't complain, right? Catching it dead there.
We found a way.
We found a way. We found a way. Somehow, some way, we found a way.
Well, because a month later, it dropped like 0.5%.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, man.
Well, dude, and you know, it is what it is. And I think we've had this common theme in both, and I think most of the podcasts that we've all done together is if there's a way for you to scrap things together and get in the game, and there's an opportunity for you to do so, figure out a way to do it and just get in the game, because we know that the rates are going to go like this, and there will be a time, whenever it will be, that you'll be able to refi out. So if you can afford it now and make it work now, get in the freaking game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there was much of a question for me. I just, yes, agree. Amen.
Well, we're on the topic of rates. I think it makes sense to talk about that. I think our predictions were a little aggressive on when the cuts would happen.
Yeah.
And the not marketing, but the projections changed after we did the podcast. It was going into 2024, there was a lot of talk of like 4, 5 rate cuts. How many ended up happening?
So we'll know tomorrow, right? Because the Fed's having their last meeting of the year tomorrow, but it's extremely likely. It's in like the 93 to 94% range of expecting them to do another interest rate cut, which would be the third of the year. They're expected to be a 0.25%. Excuse me. So yeah, they ended up they ended up cutting similar to what they projected in terms of total amount and in terms of how many cuts there were. So the amount that they cut and the number of cuts was very close to what was projected. But I think the sentiment of the market was a lot more bullish in January, end of last year, end of January. And I think part of that, to be honest, is somewhat like market manipulation, right? By some of the powers that be, or just, you know, the people that want there to be more enthusiasm among buyers in the market and anticipating that rate drop, you know, to get people off the fence, to get the number of transactions up, or to keep, you know, business flowing. So who knows? I mean, there's so much of, you know, chicken or the egg of what's influenced what, the market or the Fed, or kind of both are influencing each other. I think they were kind of playing chicken, not to reuse that, but they were kind of playing chicken with each other, kind of, you know, the government, the Federal Reserve, and the market were all trying to figure out what was actually going to happen. And consumers were also trying to figure out if they were going to buy or not buy, or if the market was going to crash. And the fact that we just kind of saw, you know, a little bit up and down in the rates, I think it got people a little excited, and then got them, you know, a little more calm. They kind of were teasing us a little bit with the rate drop. And I mean, then it was an election year too. So there was just a lot that was happening this year, you know?
I think we could have better.
We should have baked that into the numbers.
We should have better accounted for the fact that the Fed would more likely adjust it at the end of the year, closer to the election. And I think Jerome Powell even came out and made a comment about not wanting to intervene with the election of some sort. I thought I remember seeing that partway through the year.
Yeah. And I think I don't think they were trying to have it appear that they were beholden to the government, because they're supposed to be separate. So I get where they're coming from. But yeah, I think we could have definitely baked into our predictions better the idea that there was going to be. But I mean, then there was just so much that happened last year or this year that we could not have predicted, right? I think we did pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, I think we talked about thinking the rates were going to end up somewhere
closer to 6,
in the 5 to 6s, and then there was also like in the mid 6s. So, you know, kind of a wide prediction, but it does seem like that's where we're still trending towards if the rates cut tomorrow. So rates wise, we were accurate. We got the right amount of cuts, about the right amount. But we were just a little bit too aggressive on the timeline.
Yeah, and I think just the back and forth, it was definitely not a steady, you know, just walking down the stairs of the rate this year. It looked much more like a, you know, any other kind of a graph or financial graph that you're watching. There was a back and forth. And then, yeah, we saw a nice, the most significant drop we saw was right before that first rate cut in September. So like the end of August, beginning of September, I think I had 2 or 3 clients that were able to get a refinance in that made sense. And then immediately, a week or 2 later, once the cut actually happened, I had priced out refinances for 4 or 5 other clients, and they just didn't make sense anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's just been interesting seeing how everything's been going back and forth. But I don't know. I'm curious to see how we end up predicting for the next year and how that ends up working out as well.
I think it didn't help as well that the Fed came out with a 50 point drop at the start.
Yeah.
And I think that added a lot of turmoil. I think had they done 25, 25, 25, it would have been more of a consistent pattern the whole way.
Yeah.
But I think when people saw the 50, everybody was like, oh my gosh.
It spooked them a little
bit.
bit.
And then the Fed had to pull it back because then everybody was going crazy. I think it's just interesting. You can't predict what the Fed's going to do, but total cuts, total amount, fairly close.
Yeah, very close. I think what was initially predicted, I think we predicted maybe a little bit over 1% of cuts, maybe 1 to 1.5. If they cut it a quarter tomorrow, then will it be at a full percent for the entire year? So I think it's still a little bit maybe on the low end of what we were expecting or hoping for, but it's a little bit more than what the Federal Reserve was
originally broadcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How bullish are you as we wrap up, at least on rates, looking into next year? How bullish are you on that kind of downward stair stepper trend? Especially, obviously, we talked about this year was an election year. We now know the results. That's going to change. Changing of the guard is going to happen in January. What is kind of your take on how bullish you are on rates into next year?
I think it's going to be something similar to what we saw this year, to be honest. And maybe that seems lazy, but I don't think it's going to be super aggressive. I know some people are saying, oh, well, now that they've started lowering rates, some of the CPI numbers are ticking up and inflation is starting to move up. So I think they're going to have to be considerate as they move things lower. But I don't think that effectively mortgage rates are going to just be a straight line down. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Federal Reserve is going to increase the rates, but I think we'll probably see 2 to 3 rate cuts next year. Probably a similar amount, maybe around 75 basis points, maybe 100, and I think they'll probably space them out a little bit if they can, just to kind of give it a little bit of time because it's not an instantaneous change, right? So I think rather than, loading it all from September to December over just a few months, I think we might see one in the spring, maybe one closer to the end of summer, fall, and then maybe something as well at the end of the year, depending on how the market adjusts. But if the market starts picking up a little bit more and, maybe some of the sentiments around the economy and things change, then I don't know that they're going to try to get the rates much, much lower very quickly. And I think if you look historically, a 7 to an 8% mortgage rate historically is about the median, about the average, both. So I don't think that they're going to try to get us down to 4 unless they have to. And I don't want to experience the economy where they have to drop it to 4. That's not fun. And it's going to cause so much inflation. So I'm hoping that they can just kind of slowly lower things down.
It seems to me, if I were to take a guess on it, I think they're going to end up somewhere around mortgage rates around 6. And I think it's going to stay like that for a while.
I think so.
I mean, it may go down lower into the 5s, and I think some qualified people will be able to get lower rates and whatnot. Because
especially government loans, right? Because we're talking about conventional loans, so normally it's a 0.5% lower, roughly, right? Not guaranteed. So a 6% conventional, probably a 5.5 VA or FHA, which is a slam dunk for a lot of them.
Yeah, I don't see a need.
I don't see 4s.
The market seems to be performing.
I don't even think 5s.
Yeah, I think it's going to be closer to 6.
Low 6s. Yeah. I think 6 to low 6.
Well, and even just talking about the market performing, we were even talking before this podcast, just looking year over year, how the market has performed. Mm-hmm. And you were relaying a scenario where he was talking with one of our mentors and just kind of doing the guessing game, like, hey, how do you think prices went up or inventory changed, or, how did these things change year over year? And I think the sentiment there on the market is, hey, we're still in a pretty strong position right now.
This section of the podcast goes out to the gurus that I talked shit on earlier this year. because they all said the market was going to crash. So now I've got the facts to back it up. This is for Fresno area. So this is like Fresno County.
Localized, yeah.
Yep. This is not national. Home prices from same time last year are up. Average sold price, 3.7%. So Keller was right on the money. Keller said average, because we talked about like a standard appreciation. I think I threw out 5 to 7, and Keller corrected me and said it's 3 to 5 is what standard appreciation is. Keller's right on the money, 3.7%. So if you bought a house this time last year, in a perfect world, your home's worth about 3.7% more. So our idea about the best thing to do is get in the game. Home prices didn't go down, so waiting didn't save anybody anything.
Yeah.
And rates haven't drastically changed. So think about it that way. I think that's important to clarify. And then going to inventory, because a lot of people were saying that they thought the foreclosure market was going to spike and blow up the economy. Did not happen. We had, from same time last year, inventory jumped from 2.7 months, meaning, and I guess this needs to be defined for people. Inventory and months and all this has to do with how quickly homes are being bought. So they're saying in a normal market, if everything were to continue and no new houses were listed last year, it would take 2.7 months to run out of homes for sale. Now it's 2.9 months. So a marginal increase, percentage-wise, it's 7.3% increase.
Well, and I'd like to say one thing there. I think we talked about this slightly yesterday when you shared that with me, because I think that was interesting, seeing that we had a healthy increase in value, and we also had a slight uptick in terms of inventory. I mean, I think that shows it's not a huge uptick. It's like 10%, 8% more inventory, whatever.
7.3.
7.3. So it's a decent uptick, and yet the value still increased, right? So I think that's a good sign of strength for the local market in terms of value, because when supply is increasing and values are also still increasing, that I think shows strength in whatever asset you're looking at.
Yeah, and for context, for the number of homes in our market, so these numbers are through November. November of last year, there were just under 1,900 homes for sale in our market. This year, it was 2,150. So we're talking, that is a substantial number, a couple hundred houses.
Well, hold on. You said what? Hold on. I just want to go a month over month. 2,250.
2,150. Last year was 1,874.
So that's a 14.7% increase month over month.
I went over quarter.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to know.
That's true, because there's anomalies from month to month.
Well, there was an election this year,
That's
too.
a great point.
But regardless, we're talking not that many homes, but it shows healthy movement. And I think that's the other thing I wanted to talk about was we talked about volume of homes transacting. We talked about step-up buyers maybe getting into the game again, things of that. I mean, number of homes sold this year, number of homes for sale this year, and number of homes contracted this year are all up.
Yeah.
Meaning there's more transactions happening this year than last year, which is good for the economy. It shows people are moving again, people are getting active.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And even at least in my personal business with the clients I'm talking to, especially in this quarter, I've seen a lot more so than any time this year, kind of those either step-up buyers start to come out of the woodworks, which is really interesting given we're still, obviously, traditionally, we're kind of at this median interest rate point, but a lot of those buyers have started to come out of the woodwork, and I think they're even probably, in my conversations with them, feeling very confident not only in the equity that's built in their current home, but people are confident and not as worried about jumping into a quote-unquote higher interest rate for people who may be stuck in the webs with
Just
what
recency
COVID
bias.
brought us.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's recency bias.
Exactly.
Yeah. When you have just been paying attention recently and they were less than half of what they are now, it doesn't make any sense. But then I think, once you are educated and you think about supply and demand, if the if you do think rates are going to have to drop like crazy, well, then you better buy whatever you want now, because my goodness, the value is going to shoot up an insane amount.
I also think all those people holding out, they can't hold out anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, family changes, all the things that necessitate changing where you live. Yeah. At a certain point, you're like, dang, is it really worth it? Is it really going to crash? Like, no. Why continue to suffer in a home that doesn't suit what you need for what?
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I helped a couple clients this year that made step ups. And it was interesting to see that they were all over the price range, right? As high as in the 8s, as low as in the 300,000 range. And it all starts with the people in those forever homes selling, right? Either relocating, passing away, divorce. They're the things that lead to forever homes coming on the market. And when the forever home comes on the market, the people in a step-up home list their house for sale, they buy the new house, and now the people in a lower step-up home, they make the move up, and then first-time home buyers take the new houses that are starter homes. So it started, and you and I talked about this yesterday. We were looking more in depth on the numbers, but it was almost a 20% increase in homes over 700,000 that were listed and sold versus last year.
Yeah, I don't think I did not see that in 23. And I think we talked about that too. We're like, what was mainly missing? Oh, step-up buyers was missing.
That's exactly.
Like, those started coming back into the marketplace this year.
And it was like 20-something%, meaning, that was a substantial chunk of the increase in velocity in the market was these step-up buyers coming back and saying, as great as this low rate is, I would rather be in this nicer house, even if it's a little more expensive. So that was interesting to see, and I think that comes from people not being able to just stay in one place forever. At the end of the day, things happen, you have to move.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's been that was very illuminating because I felt that was true, but then looking at the statistics and seeing that there was a 20% uptick in that price point locally, it totally made sense.
And I think the 4%, let's just call it 4% increase in home values is a much more sustainable growth pattern. Yeah. Now, it would be interesting to see what 2024's inflation rate ends up being. You may not have actually built a ton of equity per se, but the COVID years of 10% increase in home prices was unsustainable. And I think we need to go through like a decade of just this kind of growth to get the affordability index back to a place where people can buy more regularly.
Yeah, I agree.
Dude, and I'm curious too, because we talked in January of this year, and we were just coming off the tail end of probably about a 4-week, maybe month-long period where we all had clients, and we talked about it. It was kind of like this window of the perfect buy-in opportunity, right? Where clients were able to get in, negotiate big credits, get into the home they loved, buy down their rate, like that kind of 4-week period starting, early to mid-December of last year into maybe beginning of January this year. I'm curious, with buyers and clients that you're working with, agents that you're working with, are you seeing any of that kind of opportunity here in this similar time frame, or what are you seeing in terms of transactions and negotiations?
I think that we're not seeing the same level of deal opportunity as we saw last year, right? Because there was just so much more uncertainty, especially heading into an election year and all the other things. So I think the fact that we've already seen three rate cuts, like we all know rates have come down some and are like, people are like, oh, well, whether or not it is absolutely going to happen, the sentiment is that rates are trending lower, right?
Can I jump in here?
Absolutely.
You referenced if the rates come down 1%, that there was like a statistic. It's like a rule of thumb that like 5 million more buyers come into the marketplace.
Yes.
That sounds like what you're saying right now.
Yeah. So I think we have already seen that start to happen exactly. And not all of the people that are now qualified are going to all go buy a home. That's not how it works. But when you're bringing in that much more competition, I'm seeing a lot more, even in this season, multiple offers on the same home. So not to say that no seller credits are being negotiated, or once they're in escrow and there's, they do the discovery and all of their inspections, that they're not able to negotiate repairs or credits of some sort. I think that is still absolutely happening. But I'm seeing sellers being very willing to be like, no, if we don't get our price, we're just going to Airbnb this property. Maybe it's an investment home that was literally, I have a home that just went clear to close yesterday. They should be signing tonight or tomorrow, but they were putting an offer on a home in the Clovis area that was also an Airbnb. And the sellers were like, we'll just keep Airbnb-ing it until the spring. Like, we don't get our number, we'll just make we'll cover our expenses or then some. And then we'll make all the money or more in 3 or 4 months. And so I think buyers are now starting to also see like, oh no, I think it's starting to turn the other way. I think, there's starting to be more competition and more people that I'm talking to, even anecdotally in their workplace or their friends, are talking about wanting to buy a house. They're seeing it in the news. So I think we still have a chance to get a better deal than you're going to get, I think, later this year. But I don't think it's going to be the same as what people were getting last year. Because we were seeing like, getting in, the appraisal comes in 30 grand over and they're getting a 10K credit. You're
Exactly.
like, oh my gosh.
And it was different even than the 2022 December, which was also very lucrative.
It's interesting too, because even talking about our company inventory, right? And this discussion ties in perfectly. We're seeing that even on our inventory that's listed, that either has been sitting for a little bit, not a ton of activity on the offer side, or maybe we accepted one and for whatever reason it fell out. I think that perspective and that mindset in the buyers is very true, because we've seen on the majority of those, even if we've been sitting for a while and we do have the one offer come in, that offer's coming in very more often than not at asking for little to no credits at all. And we're getting what we're asking for, even with the property sitting for a little bit longer. And I think it is this sentiment of buyers just wanting to be able to get into the game, and maybe even foreshadowing a little bit to where, let me just get in. I like this house, whether it's the step up or my first one, whatever it is. I just want to get in. I'm not going to mess around with asking for anything big. And it's really shown to be very strong, at least on our inventory side, with getting stuff sold.
Yeah. I just to touch on that, I think no matter whether or not this is not true of all people, but I think with how many different conversations I have across different spectrums and fields and professions and all of that, the sentiment for buyers and sellers since the election, I think, has warmed for everybody.
Absolutely.
Right? So
Yeah.
I think when that happens, I think that that's usually good for most markets. And so I think that the buyers are more interested and excited and optimistic about the future values, but sellers are too. And so if both parties are feeling more optimistic that, hey, what this commodity or asset is going to increase in value, maybe not an insane amount, but it's not going to be worth less in a month or two, I think that also kind of makes deals a little easier to happen, right? So as long as the balance of inventory and buyers on the market stays somewhat healthy, then I feel like there should be a decent amount more transactions in 2025. That's what I will say is I think the transaction number we will see increase as well year over year, because I think the overall sentiment is improving.
You know what's interesting too? This is one thing I don't think we ever accounted for or even discussed, was this whole thing that the media made into a huge fiasco regarding all of the realtor commissions.
Yeah.
And I remember when this first came out, everybody was worried that this was going to be, such a huge hit, not only to the agent and the agent industry with real estate professionals, but what's going to happen to all these transactions. And at least in my activity and just in conversations within the office with other agents, and even, the numbers don't lie, it hasn't really seemed to change anything at all.
My guess, when I was talking to some of my realtor friends who will remain unnamed, but they'll know who they are, one in particular, that was like, kind of sky is falling. Like, no, it's going to be, I was like, maybe we'll see an average realtor commission decrease of 10 to 15%, which I'm not saying that's great, but I was like, that it just happens, right? It happens in most commission and service related industries. Oftentimes you see somewhat of a shrinking of commissions as there's more competition and more market knowledge that's out there. All of the tools and Zillow and Trulia and all these online retailers and businesses that are vying for attention and sharing information that used to only come from a realtor. Not that realtors are not valuable. I would never want to not work.
Hey.
I would never want to not work with a realtor myself personally. I would never want to do a for sale by owner. But I think the value is still inherently there for the good realtors, right? I think the bad ones, good riddance. If you can't prove your value and you can't negotiate for yourself and your client, go do something else. But the people who are truly professionals like yourselves that are excellent at what you do and your skill set is appreciated and sought after, it will be compensated. So I think it's a big nothing burger at the end of the day.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I think you are right. The numbers speak for themselves. The market did not change substantially at all from this whole lawsuit that filled the news media for 6 months. That being said, the other big thing that filled the news media was the election. And not to toot my own horn, but I did say that I felt that the opportunity buys this year would not be December and January. I said in the podcast, I felt
around the election,
September, October, up to election day. And I think that did hold true because immediately following Trump getting elected, regardless of if people felt he was good or bad, at least everybody had the same general consensus of what the markets were going to do.
Well, the markets reacted how you said. They immediately reacted.
Immediately, every market kind of started lighting up from crypto to, just a regular stock market to the real estate industry. And we saw an immediate impact on our inventory shortly after the election.
Yes.
Now, I don't think every single one of those people was excited about the results, but they felt confident that there was some certainty on what to expect. And I think all that uncertainty right before the election, those people that bought, they made very, very quick cash because I think they're going to see a bigger return than 4% this year.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the cool thing as well is that as we were looking at some of the charts, and I'll pull it up as well, but as we were looking at some of the charts, the seasonality around when you purchased and what kind of a deal you're going to get is something that's always interesting to me. And especially when you look at the average sold price throughout the year, usually around the holidays, around the winter time is when the homes are less expensive or the average sales price is at least less expensive. So I think really you're hitting the nail on the head that probably that period, when we look at the graph in 6 months from now and we get all of the data, I think that we're going to see that there was probably the largest percentage gain year over year from October or November of 24 to October or November of 2025.
Yeah,
the following year.
I think the people that bought right before there was some level of certainty, they took advantage of the market in that moment. Just because.
Well, and rates peaked right before the election. That's what not a lot of people maybe knew because maybe people listening to the podcast didn't. I mean, not a lot of people bought from September to November, right? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people also weren't aware of how negative the rates were. Like there was a lot of doom and gloom amongst loan officers where they're like, are you freaking kidding me? Or, you didn't lock a loan or, your client decided to wait a month or wait a week or two to lock. And now their rate is 0.5% worse. Like it got drastically worse right before the election and it's now calmed down since then. But from the first rate cut of 50 basis points in September through the election, the rates were all trending in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I'm looking at a slide right now. This is backtracking a little bit to what we were talking about, getting into forever homes. I mean, we've got price range 500 to 750,000, up 16.2% from a year ago. 750,000 to $1 million, up 19.9%, and then $1 million plus, up 23%.
That's
year
crazy.
over year.
That's what I'm saying is the inventory starts at the top and works backwards.
Yeah.
Because nobody's going to upgrade unless they have the perfect house.
Yeah. No,
So
I think that's exactly correct.
And we already knew that there were a lot of people holding out, selling those forever homes because they thought X, Y, and Z, they didn't have anywhere to go. Or, excuse me, not forever homes, step-up homes. And so when those homes in the $1 million plus range or these like forever homes, we'll call them, are coming up, that's what allows people to say, okay, I would rather pay $1,500 more to be in that house and sell my current place. And so it only took a matter of time before people started normalizing to the fact that this isn't going away.
The new normal. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that prediction, though, we're kind of ping-ponging here, but going back to the election thing, I think the uncertainty period won't be right now. I think it was right before the election.
Agreed. Yeah.
And we noticed that on our own end, a lot of sellers wouldn't sell right before the election, and a lot of buyers were not making offers at that time. And nothing changed on our projects except the election happened, and then how many went into escrow?
We had within a time period of 1.5, maybe 2 weeks, literally 3 or 4 of our listings that had not generated a bunch of activity. Day after showings upticked, and then in that 1.5, 2 week period, we put 3 or 4 into contract.
Which is so funny because I was out for the baby and I came back and I'm like, what is going on? It reminded me like when I came back from the honeymoon for my wedding and the market was like dead. And I'm like, why is it every time I leave work for a week, the market drastically shifts?
Dude, and it was interesting because we're talking about this time period right before the election. And again, in our internal inventory, we had this long list of listings that were sitting. And we said the conversation with our team, hey, we're heading into the last quarter of the year. Everything must go. We're having the everything must go sale. And week went by, and I'm like, dude, I'm worried. Everything's not gonna go.
Cade was texting me that we made bad buys.
And then literally that week and a half to 2 week period, we've seen that list freaking go significantly shrink down by putting a bunch into contract and offloading a lot of the inventory.
Yeah. It's such an interesting, I think just like stepping back from even predictions or anything, it just is interesting the exposure we get with the people that we know, you guys on the commercial side and buying wholesale and investing in state, out of state, and then meeting with people who are buying and selling homes and all of the different price points and decisions that are causing them to buy. You get such an interesting little snapshots of different parts of culture and society and the economy. And then it's fun talking about it and kind of piecing it together and being like, okay, what's actually happening? Because people might say this, that, or whatever, but their actions speak much louder than words. So seeing where people put their money and what decisions they're making, I think it really does tell a tale, at least on a local level, of how people are feeling, what their sentiment is. It's fascinating to me.
I think that's the other like talking point that we aren't really hitting on, which is these are all localized numbers. And I think if you're not a serious home buyer, all of your information about the market comes from a national level. And I think we talked about this in one of the earlier podcasts. Some markets are getting hurt right now, but our local economy and our local market have none of the fundamentals that would lead to a massive downturn or anything like that. Right. No. And so if you're thinking about buying a house, don't look at the national level as much as you need to look at the local level and understand, if you bought a home in Fresno this year, what did it do? Not if you bought a home in the U.S. as
Florida,
a whole.
Yeah. Texas.
Tying back in to the whole conversation about finding your reputable, team of real estate professionals, the right realtor, the right mortgage broker, right? That can help assist you and guide you to make the right decisions with the right information.
Yeah. That was a beautiful little bow you tied on that right before Christmas.
Right before Christmas.
Man, you're like, go ahead. And his socials are this.
This is so stupid. One other thing I wanted to talk about had to do with the percentage of sales based off of home buyer type or buyer type. So this is, I believe, this looks like it's out of 100. So these are percentages. So in 2023, 28% of home sales were first-time home buyers. This year, it was 27. So only a slight down, 1% change in first-time home buyers.
It's like 0.5%.
Yeah.
Well, no, 1%.
Investor sales, though, which is interesting to see. What did I miss?
No, I just keep going.
Focus. Investor sales were up 17% this year versus 15% last year. So that's something that catches my eyes. And then cash sales are the other thing that are down 29% in 2023, only 27% in 2024.
Yeah.
So people are not spending their hard-earned cash as often on homes. So that leaves, obviously, the step-up home buyer to have filled the void, right? Because they don't have anything called step-up home buyer here. But it is, that's got to be the group that stepped in to fill the void for the downswing.
Yeah, I think so.
I think moving into 2025 predictions, we've only got a couple minutes here.
Well, and I think the other thing too, I think a lot of people are not buying their step-up homes cash, right? So it would make sense that some of the cheaper price points and investments have gone away.
They just didn't have like
that category.
Yeah, they didn't have the category for it, but I bet if they showed it, it would be up a few percent.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So moving into 2025, it's the same question I asked last year. Where do we feel the money is to be earned? Is it the sellers? Is it the buyers in the market? Is it staying put and not doing anything? What do we think 2025 holds?
I'll speak on, I think the majority of people who bought this year who see themselves around that median interest rate, and I'm gonna tie back to you shared your prediction on seeing maybe 2 or 3 staggered cuts next year. I think people who are sitting like myself at this median interest rate, because I would like to, and I think this is where it's going to happen, is between the middle of Q2 to maybe the middle of Q3 is going to be the money time to refinance, and that's where it's going to make the most sense for people, especially who have bought around that similar time frame this year. I think it's next year, middle of Q2 to middle of Q3, I think is probably going to be a big opportunity for refinances for people who are locked in kind of similar to where I am, whether it's, call it high 6s to maybe middle 7s. I think that's going to fall between Q2 and Q3 of next year.
Yeah, so question for, I guess the question you're asking is primarily what I think is going to happen rates wise, or what's going to happen, like who's going to make the best deals.
Who do you think has the best positioning going into 2025?
I think maybe it's a cop out to say this, but I think it's very balanced. I don't think it's going to be overly tilted one way or the other. I think that we're going to see sellers making a decent amount on their sales. I think there's going to be more inventory available, which is great for buyers because there's more options and chances that they're going to get the right house for them and their family. In terms of like, who's going to maybe get more money on the transaction or get a better deal, I don't think that's always, who's winning in the transaction. So I think just more buyers and sellers will win because there will be more transactions happening and more inventory available. So I feel like we're going to be trending towards a little bit more of a balanced market, and I think that's just healthy for everybody involved.
For me, it's funny you say that. I was thinking about it before coming into the podcast when I was listening. I think the people that are most poised to have a lucrative real estate year are the step-up home buyers, because I think this will be a year where it's more attainable for you to list your home and get a fair price on your home, while at the same time having enough inventory to pick from for your step-up. So I kind of agree with you, which is to say, it's not buyer nor seller. It's the people that are going to do both that are best situated because they get to take advantage of both sides.
I think that's a great
of a
point.
balanced market.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be fair for them on both sides. They're going to get a fair offer on their sale.
Yeah.
And they're likely to not have an insane amount of competition on the buyer side. As sentiments for buyers and sellers improves, it just makes transactions easier.
Yeah.
Less cancel. I think the biggest winner is going to be all the realtors and lenders who had cancellations for no good reason, just because buyers got spooked.
Yeah,
I think that'll be the biggest winner.
I wonder if that's now that you say that's a good trend to document is cancellations and if they go down. But I mean, just to say, like, I don't think the first time home buyer this year is going to be better poised in 2025 than they were this year. I think it's marginally worse, actually.
I mean, only better in the sense that if there's move-up buyers selling those first-time homes,
I guess,
then yeah, if we have step-up buyers going from, let's say, the 6 to 7 to the 9 to 1 million range, well, then you're going to have the 3 to 4s moving up to their next house, and it should create more inventory. So I think more inventory solves a lot of problems for a lot of people.
It could. Yeah, I see the argument there, and I think if you are staging out of your real estate ownership, right? If you're selling and moving into elder care, or people have passed away and they're selling parents' houses, I don't think they have a wildly better advantage this year than they did, or in 2025 than they did in 2024.
No.
So I don't see either of those groups getting a massive change in their power. And I think the people that really benefit from this market are the people that have been waiting and need to make an upgrade, because now it's actually more feasible.
Selling and buying, clients who need to sell and buy, I think absolutely, because they'll have the best time.
During COVID, you couldn't get a house under contract. Like, you couldn't go to buy a house. Then all of a sudden it was like, it's really hard to sell a house. And now it's kind of hitting this balance point where you can both buy and sell.
Well, and I think also the winners are going to be the people who got in the game this year. And I think that's twofold. I think one, it's going to be the people who now have the opportunity to refinance at whatever point it comes into next year. I'm thinking between middle of Q2 to middle of Q3. But also, I think that we're going to see a little bit larger of an increase in appreciation. We were looking at it, what do we say, 4% year over year?
Yeah, it's 3.7 in our market.
3.7. I'm thinking, and I think, again, the winners are also going to be the people who just stay put and whether they got into the game or there's somebody who's just been who has owned their home for a while, I think we see an uptick in that 3.7%. I'm thinking we're probably going to be somewhere probably between 5 and 6.
Yeah, I was going to literally just copy your answer from last year. I think 5 to 7. I think this 25 is the year that we see a 5 to 7% appreciation.
I'm there with you.
Now I have to put a number on it. And last year I was wrong and I was too aggressive. I'm going to go on instinct here. I don't think Trump wants inflation to go up a lot. And so I think he's going to do a lot of stuff to kind of slow that down. If that happens, I think home prices only go up about 5%.
Okay,
I think
maybe 4 to 5.
I'm putting it at 5.
Okay.
So like plus or minus, 25, or 0.25%. But I think it's going to stay around 5 because he doesn't want stuff to go too fast, and he doesn't want Trump's got a lot of ego on him, and I think he cares a lot about the inflation issue and wants to be able to say he fixed it. And in order to fix it, I think rates are going to have to stay somewhat similar. The market's going to have to be adjusted to try to keep pricing pretty level.
Yeah, I think that you make a strong argument there.
So I don't think it's going to go up
I think that will be the goal. I don't know if that will be attainable.
Hard too, because people go off of how they feel, not necessarily off anything the government does.
So we've got 5. You and I were a little bit more bullish. 5 and 6, 5 to 7. We'll see where things shake up.
We said rates are going to wrap up somewhere around 6s.
I think close to 6 for a conventional loan without pain points, excellent credit. Yeah,
5.5 for government.
Yeah, I would say I would
5.75.
anticipate it to be around 6 to 6.25 at the end of the year.
Okay.
Not to say that we might get to 6 or a little bit below, but I think we'll end the year around 6 to 6.25.
I also think velocity of deals speeds up. I think number of transactions goes up. One thing we didn't talk about, and I know we're at the end here, but we didn't talk about in COVID times, total of transactions nationwide were 6.6 million. They've dropped down to this year at 4 million. So I think we start making the climb back up from 4 million total transactions up into the 4.5 range.
Yeah.
So I think an increase in velocity, but not an increase in inventory or anything like that. I just think more homes will transact.
Yeah, I would say 4.5 to 5 million would be my guess.
4.5 to 5 million. That's a pretty substantial jump. That's 20%.
Yeah.
Or 25%. Wow. Okay. Well, I think that's it. Anything else that we need to say to get it on the record on what our thoughts are? I think
No.
overall, it was a good, healthy year for real estate. Everybody who was working hard was able to feed their family, and we still saw a contraction in number of people in the business. And like you said, if you can't do it, good riddance,
I mean,
That's what you said. That's what you said, not
Your
me.
words, not his.
Don't get mad at me.
I'm pretty sure it
You
was.
said
Wind the tape back. It wasn't exactly that, but essentially,
But I think there'll still be more market contraction on the number of people in the real estate industry.
Yes.
But I think total
sure.
deal velocity will go up.
I think deal volume would go up. Yeah.
All right.
There it is.
Well, give Keller a follow. It's David Keller and Co.
Just the first initial, but that's okay.
D Keller and Co. on Instagram. And we'll have to have you back midsummer to give an update.
I'm looking forward to it.
Check in. Let's roll.
Merry Christmas, everybody.